Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, and welcome to my amateur investigation into the KURTZ family from Ukraine. I hope you enjoy hearing about our ancestors as much as I did learning about them. I want to add that like any genealogical study, there are far more questions unanswered than answered. There's a bit of speculation, a bit of recollection, and a bit of hope that any of this makes sense, especially since I've had such a short time to prepare. The most important prospect is that maybe one of our own descendants will get the urge to study our genealogy in the future and take the investigation even further. You will notice that this is a bloody long video, and that is not to be annoying on my part, but I needed to fit everything in. So in the end, I actually divided into part one and part two. Maybe with that, you can also break it down into manageable pieces and watch it over time, like in the whole of 2019. If you want to have the PowerPoint as well, just email me and I can send it to you. Like I said, you'll notice mistakes, misnomers, gaps, and discrepancies, and I'm sorry for that, but this is what happens when you're telling the story of people who are long gone and they're not here to talk to and get the facts straight anymore. Just a brief introduction. Our family trees are expanding, and we have two loaded in the genealogy site myheritage.com. And one's under my name and one is under Matthew KURTZ. We can give you access to the trees so that you can add even more information about your own families. However, for this study, we're starting with Harry KURTZ, his first wife, Ulka KURTZ, his second wife, Rose, and the four children, Max KURTZ, Sarah KURTZ, who's my grandmother, and her children, Pauline, Jack, and my mother, Reva. And we have Morris KURTZ, and there's mention of a fourth child, Edia KURTZ, but we don't find any further information on her in our studies. Well, we've talked about who we're going to focus on, and this is where from the beginning. It's just a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about. So have a look. See these cable cars in this photograph. My mother remembers meeting my grandmother Sarah, Harry KURTZ's daughter, at the tram after a long day at work sewing. When we traveled to North Minneapolis in October in 2019 for this investigation, those trolleys were long gone. However, a wonderful tour guide named Ray Lazar from the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest showed us all around and helped us understand what life would have been like for the KURTZ family after the turn of the century. He also gave us a DVD called We Knew Who We Were, Memories of the Minneapolis Jewish North Side, to share with all of you, and I've put it in at the end of this presentation. I think you'll enjoy it. This is the only photo that we have of Zeta Harry KURTZ, and it's from the year he died, 1944. Faintly, it says Los Angeles on the left-hand side, but no one really thinks he made it that far to the West Coast, and he's buried in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here we have some photos of Harry's mode of transport, and as far as we know, he was all alone and heading to meet Dr. Jack KURTZ. In August 1914, the ship was taken over and used to transport troops in England, where she was used as accommodation for German prisoners for the rest of that year. And then from 1915 until the end of World War I, she was basically used as a transport ship until 1926 when she was scrapped in Italy. The Grand Trunk Railway from Canada, well, its records are a good place for genealogical study and a way to trace immigrants coming from or through Canada to the USA to escape persecution. They kept good records as well. That photo was actually taken in 1915, so a year after Harry would have left for America. He left, and his goal was to save enough money to bring his family over to the United States. including his daughter Sarah, who's my grandmother, and her family. Harry did uh, get the money together. It took some time, and it wasn't until the end of World War One, and then after months and months of trials and tribulations in Europe, starting in 1921, the family finally arrived in 1922 via Ellis Island in New York, and we were reunited with Harry in Minnesota. However, the next few slides document chronologically Harry's journey to American citizenship, and that'll take us from 1914 to 1927. You'll see here that his name was Gershon Kartzovic, and I know I've said that entirely wrong, but I'm really not sure how he would have pronounced it. Can we talk for a few more minutes about that immigration card for Harry? We know that his ship came all the way down to Quebec, and we have a fair idea from documents that he got on the trunk route here, so the Grand Trunk Railway in Canada, and he followed it along down all the way past Lake Ontario to immigrate through Port Huron in Michigan. Now, this is where the story ends because I haven't been able to figure out how he got from here to Minnesota. But I'll show you a few more maps, and I'll keep trying to see if I can find out what was the most common mode of transport in 1914 for him to make the final leg of his journey. So, as I was saying, the SS Canada comes down the Gulf of the St. Lawrence and down the St. Lawrence River into Quebec, and most likely finishes here in Quebec City. If he gets on the Grand Trunk Railway, Harry, and he makes his way all the way down to Port Huron, as the document suggests, this is where we lose track of how he actually got into Minneapolis. Let's have a look at the next slide and see. So if he was up here at Port Huron, did he come down this way on a country line, a Minnesota line, to come all the way up to Minneapolis? Or did he go north? And did he go up and above Lake Michigan and around? Or by boat across from Grand Rapids to Milwaukee? It's a mystery at the present. This photo here was probably the most helpful in my genealogical study because it's the oldest one we have. And with everyone's input, like I'll show you on the next slide, we have figured out who a few of our family members are, so it's amazing. And of course, I'm especially grateful for great-grandfather Harry KURTZ, who my mother calls Zeta, because his story led me to a bit more knowledge about everyone and new cousins I didn't even know I had. So it's been really amazing. And as I say about these sort of journeys, I'm grateful for the courage and tenacity of all of our ancestors, and I look forward to sharing their stories and history with everyone in the family. This photo's been great for everybody. I loved seeing that beautiful face of my grandma Sarah and a young Sam, Mickelkiss, and then Mitchell upon arrival in Minnesota when they joined Harry. And then Holly and Matthew KURTZ and Elise were helping, and we see we've got Morris here, which I would have never known without their help, and Max here. It came to me the other day that Sarah is right here, and this woman looks very familiar in one of the other photos, and I think it would be Elka. And as far as my family knows, this is from Ukraine at someone's wedding, unknown to us, from 1915. first document here shows Harry on the fourth line. He's coming in on the SS Canada via Liverpool in June 1914, and this is a part of the ship's manifest. You'll see he's listed where he comes from and where he's heading to. On this part of the manifest, Harry's up the top, and here he's called Herschel. I don't think where it says detained that applies to him. Here he lists himself as a laborer heading to Minneapolis. The next document is from 1920. It's called a Declaration of Intent to Immigrate. This is where Harry is going to end forever and all allegiances and be completely independent of Russia or any state within the bounds of the former Russian Empire. As I was saying before, he arrives to Port Huron, and this is where it showed me how he come through the bow. He was white, light-haired, 5 foot 5 inches tall, born in March. Here it happens to say, I think, 1867 or 9. It's hard to read. And he's signing off here in July of 1920. A couple of years later, or a few years later, in 1924, Harry applies for naturalization, and this is his application form. It's also where we start to learn about the county Hennepin in North Minneapolis, a Jewish enclave not too far from downtown where he lives, and it gives us some addresses for him, like this one here, which says 1015 Girard Avenue. When we traveled to Hennepin, this road is now a factory, but we could see and walk just where the shop might have been, and my mother Reva explains it very good, and I'll be able to share that information later on. This is what I was talking about down here about the 4 children with the mention of Etta or Etia, born in 1898, but we haven't been able to find any further information about her, unfortunately. By 1925, Harry KURTZ signs an oath of allegiance to America, and his family is safe in Minneapolis with him and had been since 1922. One of the most important documents we found along the way, and this was from a researcher in Minneapolis, was this one right here. It's hard to read, but Harry KURTZ, 1015 Girard Avenue, and this was from the 1931 Minneapolis Business Directory, and it lists Harry KURTZ as a grocery store owner. And my mom tells me the stories of the store, and I'll be able to share those as well. But this document was proof. Starting on a new chapter here, we're looking at the immigration process of Harry's 11 family members that come to Minnesota to join him in 1922. Give you a chance to have a look at the names and the dates. This image is from 1922, and it shows the RMS Aquitania. Now, this ship was in service from 1914 to 1950 and was the third in Cunard's line of grand trio of express world liners. But World War I broke out, and she became a troop transport and hospital ship. She actually began transatlantic passenger service again in 1920. And after 1921, when Harry sends the money to the family, they begin to plan and plot their escape. But as you will hear later on, they had many more hurdles to go through to get away. But the Aquitania pictured here, this is what brought over Harry's daughter Sarah, my grandmother, and her husband Sam, and both my Aunt Pauline and Uncle Jack, their children, are with them as well. The Aquitania departs, and the rest of the family is split up for some unknown reason and has to wait 10 more days. And then finally they board the RMS Berengaria, also of the Cunard Line. And this is a photo that also shows the ship from 1922. When it was first built, it was called the Impernator for the Hamburg America Line, but it sat in the Hamburg harbor for the whole duration of the World War I. But by 1920, she was sold to the Cunard Line, where she became the company's flagship alongside the Aquitania. With this ship's manifest, we can have a closer look. The Berengaria also sailed from Cherbourg in France, just that 10 days later. I'd like to point out that Elka and Morris and Anita are on this part of the manifest. Um, Morris here is called a cabinet maker, and Anita, a housewife. It shows that they left from Bucharest. They're with Sarah, Elka's daughter, and her sons. And down below, we've got the next three, but there's a fourth as well. Here we've got Max, Lena, and Etia, but there's also a babe in arms here, young Sam. They're also showing that they've left from Bucharest and they're heading to New York. Assuming this photo is Elka, I like to think that the family waited in New York for the second ship to arrive and then take Elka all together to Minnesota to see Harry. At this point, she had not seen her husband nor really heard from him because of World War I for 8 long years. And she arrives to a north side that held the largest concentration of Jews between Chicago and Denver. The community was really flourishing ever since the late 1800s and up until about 1960. Within the north side, 2 neighborhoods developed, an early immigrant neighborhood and a second generation one as well. The immigrant neighborhoods, known as the near north side, were chiefly made up of people who had, like our family and like many other thousands of Jewish people, fled the Russian Empire to start life anew in America. Between the late 1880s and 1900 alone, Minneapolis' Jewish population swelled from about 500 to about 4,000. The near north side flourished, and as it did, what happened was the housing in the area decayed, and Jews were starting to gain an increased measure of financial security, obviously due to their industrialness, and began moving west and further north, out to the western city limits. The locus of the second generation north side flourished also from the 1930s through to the 1950s, and Plymouth Avenue, which I traveled on, was a very important avenue to our family. You'll see some photos in the presentation of something like the Liberty movie house. That would have been on Plymouth Avenue, and my mom remembers going there for movies, and it had cafes, delicatessens as well. Significantly, though, all of the children on the north side, the Jewish ones, whether they lived in the Summerfield housing project or in the relatively affluent Homewood area near the western city limits, all of them attended Lincoln Junior High School and North High School, which is really interesting to our study because we've definitely proved that without a shadow of doubt for our own family. In sum, the North Side was a complete neighborhood. It had all the institutions and commercial establishments that Jewish communities needed, but it also had, well, a few great men and women and some rogues as well. We've got a video at the end of the presentation, and it was originally filmed in 1999, but it is really professional, and it's broken down into manageable pieces to watch, and I think that you'll all really enjoy it because it tells us even more about the north side of Minneapolis where our family lived. Can I change pace just for a minute? And I want to go to Morris KURTZ. He's the son of Elka and Harry, and he wrote a really fabulous memorial to his brother Max's sons that I want to share with you guys. We worked hard, Holly, Matthew, Elise, and even me, even though I'd never seen the photo before, to work out if we could identify the family. And this is what we think we know. I know for sure that this is my grandmother, Sarah. This is Lena, who was married to Max. This here could have been Sam's sister, my Aunt Emma, and her husband, Simon. Or this fella could even be a young and slim Zeta, Harry KURTZ. Or even they could be Lena and Isidore Green, the parents of young Clara, right here, cousin Clara, who would have been about 3 at the time. But I'll carry on. I think through photo identification, that this is Dr. Jack KURTZ. This is his wife. I believe that this would be Annette, sitting right up behind Morris. She was his first wife. I think this is the mother, grandmother Elka KURTZ, the first wife of Harry. This could be Etia. There was a 4th child for Harry and Elka. We just lost complete track of. I believe that this is Max, and that, again, this is his wife, Lena. And this is definitely my grandfather, Sam Michelkiss Mitchell, and his wife, Sarah. This is their little boy, my Uncle Jack, and this is their daughter, my Aunt Pauline. The ages are right for about this period. And I'm quite unsure who this child here is at all. I hope you all can think of, if you've got any photographs that can categorically prove who's who, but that's the best we can do at the minute. And it's thought the photo was taken in the USA in Minneapolis, circa 1922 or a little bit afterwards, because my mother, Reva, is not shown here. She wasn't born yet. She wasn't born until 1927. This is a photo of Morris and Ethel KURTZ's daughter, Elise KURTZ Laviano. She lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and I just met her and learned of her recently. She's on Facebook if you want to try to find her. Now, her father was Morris KURTZ, so moving on a bit, he wrote a 1964 memoir dedicated to his brother Max's sons, Sam and Frank KURTZ. And he wrote it just a few years before he died, maybe 2. Morris's story is familiar of the period. Like so many sons of his time, his father, our Harry, disowned him for marrying outside the Jewish faith, so he and his second wife moved to the East Coast. Max, his brother, dies much earlier than he does in 1937, and his family are on the West Coast. Harry himself dies in 1944, and I don't know if he ever saw his sons again after they left Minneapolis, in a bit of a rush and a push after the bakers and upholsterers strikes. But I do know that my mother and her mother, Sarah, never traveled back to Minnesota while he was alive, after they moved to the West Coast when my mom was about 16 in 1943. Unfortunately, Zeta Harry also disowned Sarah's oldest, my Aunt Pauline. She also married a non-Jew, and he did not accept her children, Denny and Jerry Sullivan, or their father, Bob. I can remember my mom telling me that if she tried to bring little Jerry Sullivan into the shop in Hennepin for some candy that Zeta, Harry, would put his fingers to his temples and go into a complete trance of chanting. He was so distressed by the sight of little blonde-haired Jerry Sullivan. The next three slides are dedicated to Morris's account, and I've narrated them for you because we had a copy, and I wanted to be able to do that. So bear with me as the slides go through. Hi, everyone. Interrogation would not be easy. I convinced him that I should take the stand on all of the accusations against us. After one interrogation, when they brought me back, all bloodied up and hardly able to stand up after a beating, he came over to comfort me, with another political prisoner there who was, by coincidence, also named Morris, but we had called him Motka. Max covered me with his embrace and said to Motka, "If they come again, we will all revolt against this kind of torture." Then he got up on one of the bunks and started talking to all the prisoners. There were over 100 political prisoners in this one big room. I was so proud of Max, his fire and his eloquence, but I also was afraid for him and said to Motka that I was afraid after this speech that they would come for him and take him down for interrogation. Motka said, "Not unless they take us all down." And when they did come after Max a little later, they did not take him away because by that time the whole prison was in revolt. I recall that at the lunch hour that day, the warden was afraid to line us up to go into the mess hall, but ordered food to be brought up into each prisoner's room. Instead of eating, the men threw the food out the grated windows and began banging with the mess kits. Soon the city got to know about the conditions in the prison, and there was mass pressure expressed through delegations for an end to the tortures. Next day, the warden asked for a committee, of which Max was made spokesperson. And this committee came back with the promise of no more beatings. Motka described to me this meeting with the warrant. He said that Max at first put the prisoners' grievances and demands to the warden in Russian, and during that time the warden was making comments to his own staff in German. Thinking that no one present understood his language, then Max summed up with a most biting speech in German back to the warden, in the surprise of everyone there. Motka said it was the most eloquent speech, and it must have been, because afterwards there were no more beatings. This prison was in the Czech Republic, and here we were retained for about a month, as near as I can remember. Later, most of the political prisoners were being transferred to another prison in the city of Baltz. We arrived there in the afternoon, but they didn't want to march us to the prison when the people were on the street, so they waited until after midnight. From the station, it was a few miles walk, and as we were chained together, we walked very slowly, so we came through the city at dawn. We had quite rich relatives in this city, and we felt that if we could shout out to them, they might help us. This is a custom in that city, or should I say there was a custom, that the bakers peddle hot bagels and bread at dawn, and they shout, or sing, or chant what they have to sell. Max said, "Let's sing out to the bagel singers our names and the names of our relatives, and that they should get in touch with us." We began this, and the guards started yelling and ordering silence, but by this time we had sung out the information, and then the rest of the prisoners started singing and yelling out to cover for us, and the guards never did find out who started that singing. Sarah will probably remember their names, which has escaped me, finally got to see us, after much difficulty and some bribing of officials. A couple of months later, they transferred us with some other political prisoners to the main political prison in Moldovnik. There we remained a few more months until our uncle got in touch with our father, Harry, and with his brother, Jack KURTZ. Our uncle, Jack KURTZ, who was an eye specialist in Minneapolis. I'll just make a note there that we have some information on Jack KURTZ. We're not 100% sure he was a relative. However, he is buried next to Harry and Annette. Together they sent some $12,000 to Romania, over $1.5 million lei. This was paid for us as a bribe in the courts, openly and officially. Our Uncle Jack got back an official receipt, complete with government stamps. Upon our release, we returned to our uncle's home in Valts to await arrangements for our going. We were not happy about this, and one evening Max asked me to walk out with him, and we walked in silence for some time, and he suddenly said, "Let's go back." So both of us had been thinking the same thing. We talked of all we had gone through, and then we went back to our uncle's house, and all that night we talked and talked about how whether we should try to make arrangements to bring the family over, a terrible risk for them, or go back ourselves, which was almost certain death sentences for both of us. So after a long night of talk, we decided that in leaving the USSR, we had made an unforgivable mistake, but that this mistake was impossible to correct. So therefore, we would proceed to America and be with our dad and take our mother with us. Then the problems became how to bring the family over to the States. You understand that there was no legal way of doing this, only through the underground. So Max said, "We need organization. So I appoint you as secretary and chairman. All in favor say aye, all against say no." Then he proclaimed, "Adopted unanimously," and we both burst into laughter. We were so noisy at this time that our aunt and uncle came into the room, and we explained why we were laughing. Then they joined us, and we sat way into the night, until Max told us about the Germans, their customs, and how they live, and I asked him for a German song, and he began to sing. I realized then that I had not heard that beautiful singing voice since his induction into the Tsarist army. Our uncle brought in wine then, and we drank a toast to the reunion of our family. Then Max said to me, "Let us drink a toast," and in one voice, to each other, to my beloved brother, and Auntie cried with joy. She and Uncle had gone through a great deal to win our freedom. By European standards, they were quite rich, and both were very good at heart. And from the day they knew of our arrest, they worked for our release, traveling from one place to another, making contacts with important people, consulting lawyers, and spending a great deal in bribes and fees. So they were really jubilant when we were released. Jubilant and also proud. Max and I were not happy, though, and sometimes could not help recalling heartbreaking events like the death of Matka, which we spoke of that night. I should have told you this earlier. However, we celebrated May 1st in 1921 in the Kishinev prison. We started early in the morning to decorate the hall, and every prisoner shaved and put on a clean shirt. Certain privileges were ours as political prisoners, not criminals, and one of those was the celebration of May Day. Still, we were surprised when we learned from the prison authorities that a special dinner would be served, and that the doors between the two political prisoner halls would be open until 6 p.m. The prisoners elected Max as chairman of the committee to plan the celebration, and he appointed me to arrange for the singing and dancing, and as main speaker he appointed Matka. Right after breakfast the singing and dancing began, and everyone noticed what a good dancer Max was, and demanded from him a vigorous and difficult Russian dance, and he performed it. He calls it a Kostanska, like the Cossacks, I think. Then they acclaimed to him in Russian style, tossing him into the air and cheering his name. He was so happy and full of life that day that inspired everybody. Then the guard called Max to send the committee to bring up the dinner, and during dinner he sang for us German revolutionary songs. Then somehow suddenly the terrifying news came through that Matka was to be shot at midnight. It appeared that Matka had already known about it, and now all we knew was that this was going to happen, so we were frozen with sorrow and helplessness. From the moment we heard about it until midnight, they were agonizing hours, and we all talked of it and how we could possibly stop it. Near midnight, we heard the guards in the corridors, and without a word, every prisoner got up and stood, a wall of human beings around Matka. But Matka addressed himself to all of us, to be calm, not to be provoked, or to endanger the lives of many others, and after his appeal, he began to sing a revolutionary song as a farewell to his comrades. As he finished, The guards unlocked the door and turned on the lights. When he saw all the prisoners lined up before him, he asked for an explanation, and Max stepped forward and said, "We know what you came for, and we will not let you take him. Only over our dead bodies." The officer of the guard was evidently afraid of the whole prison revolt, and the guards withdrew. But 2 or 3 days later, they transferred Motka during the day, and that same night we heard the shooting at midnight and knew that he was gone. Even recalling it during this night, when Uncle and Aunt celebrated our release, we were very sad. After our release, we began making contacts with the people of the underground to bring the rest of the family over, talking about their sister Sarah, her husband Sam, their 2 children, Pauline and Jack, their mother Elka. Finally, this was accomplished, and they were all in Beersheba together, which was a part of Romania. They were, as I was saying, Elka, Sarah, Sam, Jack, Pauline. I'm sorry, my phone just rang. How terrible. Friends and family, please forgive me for the interruption. This is definitely my amateur hour here. A small interruption there. So what we were talking about was the group of 11 that were finally going to be immigrating to America to meet up with Harry KURTZ. And as is written, it was Elka, Sarah, my grandmother, her husband Sam, their children Jack and Pauline, Sam's sister Emma, and it looks like Lena and Max, and Annette, Morris's first wife. It was quite a group, he says. So he says now we had to wait for visas from the American Council in Bucharest. While we were waiting, we discovered another couple from our town, and each evening we would all get together. Most of the time we enjoyed Max's stories about his life in Germany, and we would all sing, and he would sing German songs. And during this one time, he was arrested, and so was I. And about 3 months we spent in prison. Again, through our uncle, the eye surgeon in Minneapolis, and I'll put that in brackets because we're not sure he was an uncle and not just a friend, Jack KURTZ. He helped them to be released, and they were placed under house arrest. And during this time, at the urging of our mother Elka, Harry's first wife, and the aunt and uncle who had already done so much towards their release, Morris and Elka and Annette and Max and I were married in the courtyard. So it looks like Morris and Annette were married at that time. Well, and it was quite a wedding, at which even some members of the government police, like the FBI, government detectives, were present. I'm afraid I wouldn't pronounce it right. He writes it as a siguranza. During this period of house arrest, we were not supposed to be on the streets. So while waiting, we undertook to dig a place for ice to be kept during the summer in the yard of our house in which Max and I lived. Sam, Sarah's husband, was also in on this undertaking. We unanimously, once again, elected Max as the foreman, and he used to lecture Sam and me about how to work without getting too tired. This, he said, is by working with rhyme, and it is much easier to work in rhyme if you sing. So we all worked to the accompaniment of song. During this period, and especially in this working together, we really got to know each other. In a way, we were catching up on all the years we had lost out on. And during this time, my admiration and love for my brother Max grew every passing day. We used to walk out in the evening together despite our house arrest. And on one of our walks, he said to me that we had been separated for such a long time, and it was as though we hardly knew each other, so we have to make up for those lost years. In all the trials and tribulations of our arrests and torments, the fact that we as brothers were together was the greatest strength and encouragement in our life. And when we came back from our walks in the evening, Max always seemed so jolly and happy, that our landlady used to say, "You two act just like children." One beautiful summer evening, we were on the porch together, and Max said he had some good news for me, that he had gained 2 pounds. So jokingly, I said we should try out our muscles, and just then our landlady and her daughter came out and joined us. The daughter asked if I had not been there before, and whether I'd ever worked in a certain drugstore in 1914. And when I said I had, she said to her mother, "I told you, this is Morris KURTZ, aka Moisha KURTZ. Then, when we talked a little about my being in Baltz, studying to become a druggist for a short while, and after such a reunion with her daughter, our landlady became most interested in building up Max's health. She said, "I will show you how to put weight on him," and from then on she made him drink goat's milk, fresh eggs, butter, and cream. Every other hour she brought him food and milk, so that he began to look like the Max we knew before the war. I remember so well our time in Bucharest. We lived separately there, but we used to get together each evening. And Model was full of hope and, Max was full of hope and enthusiasm. As it turned out, my first wife, Annette, and I went to America alone. And this is true. There's 2 arrival dates in October 1922, and the small group was split up. Um, Max's wife Lena was pregnant with Sam and was unable to travel, and my grandmother Sarah and her family also stayed behind a little bit until after the birth. Soon after, we were all settled in Minneapolis. Here I shall recall the most joyous evenings when we all used to sing together. Max was an avid lover of poetry, and sometimes he would read or recite until late at night. We both became apprentices in the same upholstery factory. As learners, we were working very hard, and one day Max told the foreman there must be an easier way to learn, and the foreman told him to go ahead and find an easier way. From that time on, he was called the professor, for he had already gained the love and respect of all of the workers in the factory, and now they began to follow his suggestions and shortcuts or easier ways of assembling the same um, furniture and are accomplishing the same thing. Max's concern for the workers was by no means confined to his own shop. For instance, we learned of the horrible conditions of the bakers in a certain Jewish bakery, and under his direction, I started to organize them. This resulted in a short-term strike of the bakers, which was successful in winning much better conditions in recognition of the union, and at the time, a terrific victory, and well documented historically, I might add. I'm saying that. Your mother was ill during this time, so that's Lena was ill during this time, and Max had to take care of her and a baby Sam, yet found time to take an active part, speaking at strike headquarters or on street corners, collecting food for the strikers, and doing all that he could to win this victory. Another thing I remember avidly was Max's activity in defense of Sacco and Vanzetti. From myself, this is also a very well documented historical court case that you could easily look up on Google and find out more about. Morris is writing that when they hanged the 2 Italians, he calls them, they either were hanged or in the electric chair in Boston. He says they were innocent, and there was a huge crowd in front of the Labor Lyceum, blocking traffic for many blocks, with the people crying and sobbing unashamedly. Everybody felt that terrific defeat. Everybody mourned, and crowds milled about till late in the night. My memory of this scene is so clear, and above all, I can hear the voice of your father, Max, my brother, who told the people in ringing words not to despair, to organize and see to it that no such disgrace should happen again in this country. Meanwhile, both of us were very active in the union of our craft at the upholsterers, and at that time Minneapolis was the center of the upholstery furniture industry. We quite eerily succeeded in organizing the smaller shops, but of course we knew that unless we could win the larger factories, the drive would not succeed. At a meeting of the organizing committee, therefore, it was decided that Max and I should apply for work at Brooks Parlor Furniture. This was the largest, most influential shop, and also the majority of its workers of Slavic stock so it would be easier for us to converse with them. As our story from Morris about his brother Max comes to a conclusion, pages 12 and 13, each evening after work, Max and I would meet and exchange reports about the day's experiences in Minneapolis. Um, what workers we had talked to and what their feeling was. It took weeks and months of painstaking work, and we had met with considerable success, except in one department, our cutters. At a meeting of the organizing committee, Max, who was our chairman, drew up a list of the departments and of the divisions within the departments, and we made assignments as to which committee member should talk to which workers, and set a time limit within which these contacts should be made. It was in the cutting department that we had our worst setback. The main cutter was a Ukrainian with whom I had established a good service relationship, but when I finally spoke to him about joining the union, he picked up his scissors and in Ukrainian he cursed me as a dirty Jew and said if I didn't get away from him, he would run the scissors into me. Both Max and I were taken aback by his rage, for he had seemed an agreeable fellow. After deliberation and after a few weeks, this outbreak of hostility was continuing, and Max said that we must tackle him again, and he suggested that I try this time to establish a relationship with the Ukrainian cutter's family. When I had succeeded in doing this, and we discovered that this comparatively young man was the head of a family that included a wife and 6 children, his father, his mother, and they were all counting on him to support them on his low wages. He was able to convince him. Finally, they worked hard and convinced this cutter the importance of a union to him personally. After they had finally obtained a large majority of the workers as union members, there followed a period of attempts to negotiate with management, including an all-night session with the owner of the plant where Max and I worked. These did not succeed, and on August 27, 1929, we called an industry-wide strike. From myself, this is also a well-documented, important historical strike that is easily researched. Beyond this, your father devoted all of his energies to this strike in every way, father being Max, on the picket line, collecting money and food in support of the strikers and speaking in his wonderful way at large and small meetings. He directed the special squads, which visited in the home of the workers and inquired as to their needs during the period of the strike, and was in himself a flying squadron in his day. He was visiting wherever there was a hint of weakness on the part of a worker or a group of workers. Now, there's obviously some gaps in the story, as we said, but he goes on to say that this strike was in a deadlock for quite a few months and was only won with the concession that the more active strike leaders would not be reemployed in the upholstery industry. And of course, that included Max and Morris. Some months later, still without a job or income, and an additional concern about Max's wife Lena's health, Max left for California. From myself, he actually died fairly early, I think in 1937, obviously from all he had been through as well. However, Morris was saying that on the evening of Max's departure, it was the last time he was ever in Minneapolis as far as his recollection goes. They sat together until late in the night, reliving and recalling all the struggles that they'd been through and remembering some of those who had not lived through those struggles. And he said socialism is a hard road to travel, and as Lenin said, to be a revolutionist is not like taking a walk on the... I'm going to leave the end of that sentence because I'm not sure what it says. It is one of the deepest regrets of my life that I never saw Max again. Your Aunt Sarah, and that's my grandma, Reva's mom, of course can tell you many more things about him. Now, Sarah herself passed away in 1979 in Los Angeles, so she may have had good contact with Max, but we didn't grow up knowing that. Morris is saying he can't remember much more. He's trying to write about the things he knows about, but he thinks he's forgotten quite a bit. He says he wanted to tell everyone the things he remembers, more for his own sake than ours, and he really believes that Max, his brother, was one of the finest human beings that ever lived upon this earth. And he signs this Maurice Paul, July 1964, with love, to Max's two sons, Frank and Sam. The end. Hey everyone, isn't Dr. Jack KURTZ, the eye surgeon, an enigma? We're asking ourselves, who was Jack KURTZ exactly? The memoirs are certainly ambiguous, but we know that he came well before Harry, and it's because of Jack that Harry made his way out there. After researching more about Jack online, I found him as a very prominent eye surgeon in Idaho. At a university in Idaho, he's well published. He was in the military, and he's buried right next to Harry KURTZ. But unfortunately, he died quite early in 1939. The census in Minnesota in 1920 and 1930 were just a wealth of information. And on this one here, I can find that on the census, but he's as the brother-in-law, and we know like a little bit about Isidore Greenberg, don't we? And his wife Lena, and son Morris, and daughter Clara. I do because cousin Clara, who lived in Idlewild in California, she was a visitor to my parents. So they did keep in good contact. I think she has a son named Jeff Bernstein, and he also came to visit my parents a number of times in Calabasas, but I haven't been able to get him to respond to any emails or phone calls, so I'm not sure what's happened there with him. It might be in like something like Kalamazoo, Michigan, is where I think he is. As I was saying, Jack is buried right in between Annette and Harry. He arrived in 1906, well before Harry did. He was naturalized in 1915, actually a year after Harry arrived. I found it really interesting when I was researching him. If I knew more about him or any of his relatives, it would have been more pertinent here. There were quite a few historic photographs of Dr. Jack. These are two I've grabbed here. You won't mind if I pop this photo up of Zeta KURTZ that we have, the only one? 1868 to 1944. My mother never saw him again. She says her mother says they sent money when he passed away. It was really important that we went out to the cemeteries to see what we could find, and I took a couple of videos, amateur videos of in the cemeteries to share with you guys coming up next, and all that I know about the ways in which they passed away and where they're buried. We're in Minnesota, Minneapolis. We're probably only 20 minutes away from where the families lived in Pennington. And this particular cemetery is bigger than the one that Elka's in. She's farther out of town. It's also an incredibly well-kept Jewish cemetery. Here we're going to find Harry KURTZ's gravestone with his brother, Dr. Jack Isidore KURTZ, and his ex-daughter-in-law, Annette. It's really awesome to be in the cemetery. And I should have mentioned that Rose is also buried there, the second wife. She outlived Harry by a couple of years. I've had his stone translated for us best I can. So in Hebrew, dear man, a warm and honest spirit. Ziv Bar Shalom must be his Jewish name. Hebrew calendar, date of death, and the customary Hebrew acronym for may his soul be bound up in the bond of life. These four, Harry, Annette, Dr. Jack, and Rose, are in the United Hebrew Brotherhood Cemetery in Richfield. Elka is the only one that's not here. She's out at Crystal, and we'll have a look at that as well. But up next, I've got some more documents and photos to show you. For example, I ordered the death certificates for Elka and Harry from the Minnesota State Department of Health, and they've arrived. So here's Harry here. And this is where they were living at the time of his death, not far from the other residences in Hennepin. It says he died from acute coronary thrombosis. He was in the hospital for 16 days. And this was January 31st, 1944. My mom and Pauline and Jack and their families and Sarah and Sam would have left Minneapolis the year before in 1943. He says here he is married to Rose, which is correct, about 75 years old. From Russia, he lists his father as Sam KURTZ. So this particular document arrived, and so did Elka's. Let me share that too. But just quickly, I've got a better photograph here of the tombstones. Here's Annette's. You can see she never married before after Morris. My mom says she pined and cried and whined over Morris. She just never got over him leaving her for another woman. She lived till 1965, so she must have cared for Harry. And this is actually Jack's tombstone, but you can't read it from there. And Harry's is here, and then just off to the right is Rose. Fortunately, I noticed Rachel Garber KURTZ headstone just off to the right of our family, and after some further investigation, I found out that that's actually Rose. So 1866 to 1946, which matches up with all the research that we've come to understand. And that's all that we've got in Richfield. I want to pop over to Crystal now to have a look at Elka's cemetery and where she's buried. I've got a couple of extremely amateurish home videos to show you as well, but I think you'll enjoy it all. If I just jumped back to Elka for a minute, like I was saying, she's in a different cemetery altogether. So out at the Beth El Memorial Park. And it's in Crystal, and it was a little bit farther out of town. But I felt like when I was there that my mom would have been there in 1932. She would have been 5 years old and probably went to her grandmother's funeral. My mom loved Elka, just thought she was fantastic. I won't tell you the names that my mom called Rose. I might have already said that already. But she didn't like her at all.
Hi everyone, if you're watching this video, you owe your life and times to this woman here, Elka KURTZ. She was Harry KURTZ's first wife, and she was left behind with her two sons and her eldest daughter Sarah, who is my grandmother, when Harry came to America in 1914. In 1921, she had absolutely had enough and wanted her children to take her to America to be with her husband, who she hadn't seen in so long, but they weren't inclined to do so and had families of their own. But she talked them into it, and Harry was able to send money because the war years were over. The first.
I wanted to also include Elka's death certificate. You know, when she arrived in 1922, she only lasted 10 years in Minneapolis before she passed away. I thought it was interesting that she has listed her father as Barry Spiewak. I would love to have had the time to investigate that further. Maybe someone could do that in the future. That would be excellent. She was married to Harry, and she died of a carcinoma of the gallbladder and a question mark, possible bowel obstruction, possible pneumonia. And of course, she passed away in 1932. My mom would have been 5, and then Harry would have married Rose KURTZ, and that became his second wife. the one that my mother didn't care for that much. Their address here was 1015 Girard, and we went there, and that would have been where their house and their shop was, just a block away from Grant Elementary School, and a couple of blocks away from 801 Irving North, where Sam and Sarah lived with Pauline and Jack, and then Reva was born in 1927. And my mom remembers going to Girard Avenue and getting treats coming back and forth from elementary school. The problem is when we visited this time, they had leveled it and put in a factory. So that particular block of Girard is no more. I can't say enough how awesome it was to go to Minnesota and North Minneapolis and go to those beautiful cemeteries. The ones that we saw in Latvia with my father's genealogy were just in rack and ruin, so that was an extremely pleasant surprise. I was really happy about that. Now, I'm going to jump ahead for a minute to Max Kurtz, who Morris wrote about. Remember, I didn't actually know of these people growing up. It wasn't anything my mother ever said, and it seems like we grew up more ensconced with my father's side of the family, to be honest. But I'm going to try to add in a few things about Max Kurtz. And again, this is something that his descendants can do by adding more parts to the genealogy about what they know of him and his life. Thanks to cousin Matthew Kurtz. Like I said, he's been a great help in my study. He's a young man, only in his 30s. He's a great genealogist in that he's built a fabulous family tree for his side of the family. It's really worth having a look. He was telling me that Max was buried in the City of Commerce in Los Angeles and that he'd like to go visit his grave as well. Certainly really well kept, and you can see a photo of the marker here. He did die fairly young compared to Morris, but if you think back to the stories, he certainly suffered a lot during the war years, and that could have attributed. These photos here that they gave me are just fantastic because we've got Frank and Lena together, and both Sam down on the right and Frank on the left. Now, Frank, they must have lived out near Desert Hot Springs or Palm Springs because I know my mom and dad would holiday vacation in Desert Hot Springs, and they would catch up a little bit with this side of the family. And I know they went to the funeral, but I well, that's how I see it, anyways. But I was never introduced, and I never met them. And this is obviously a passport photo on the left-hand side of Lena, but it's just such a great photograph. And you can tell it's her from the family photos. Very easy to recognize. Thanks to cousin Holly, who also kept in touch with my family over the years, which has been fantastic. She's also helped me get the memoirs together and helped put this together as well, supplying this photo here of Lena in the upper left-hand corner, and herself and her sister and Mark Kurtz down below. So thanks again to Holly. And Holly lives out in Rancho Cucamonga in California, not too far from Desert Hot Springs. Just a mud map I put together of the 11 immigrants that came over on the two separate ships, and a little bit more about their extended families. Like I say, I haven't met so many of these people, but if the descendants pick up the ball and do a part 3, 4, and 5, and they can tell us more about their lives and how they intermingled with the family Kurtz history as well. Just another mud map here with the dates, and obviously it's really important that we knew their born names, their birth names. And of course, like so many Jewish immigrants, probably just about all of them, their names were changed upon arrival at Ellis Island or at the border. And that would have been the way that Harry Kurtz became Harry Kurtz, that's for sure. I've got a contact list in both parts 1 and part 2. Feel free to contact each other and let me know if you've enjoyed this information. I'm sure you've got so much to add, and I might have got things wrong and dates wrong. And like I say, it's quite an amateur genealogical presentation because I'm working hard over Christmas and New Year's trying to put it together. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of distractions at this time of year, like having fun. But my goal was to get this to everybody by what we call Boxing Day in Australia, the 26th of December, and it's already the 4th of January. So I'm running a little bit late, and I need to start a postgrad at my university here because I graduated in 2018 and I'm doing some more study. So I need to try to focus on that. So I'm going to send these 2 parts over to you in just the shape they're in at present. So this is the end of part 1, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please go ahead and have a look at part 2. And then let us know what you think and pass it to everybody you know who might be interested. Bye for now.